Pete's hand trembled slightly as he passed me the battered accordion file through the truck window. The rubber band that held it shut was frayed, the paper edges soft and yellowed with age. He looked over his shoulder before speaking. "Keep it low, son. You didn't get this from me." I took the file carefully. It was heavier than I expected, a weight that felt less like paper and more like buried history. "What's in it?" I asked. Pete exhaled slowly. "Everything they don't want you to see. The original Lakeview Estates charter, land records, survey maps, and a few notarized amendments that don't line up with what Charlene filed at the county office." He turned his head slightly, scanning the quiet street. "I was on the original committee, back before she took over. We built that HOA to keep the place clean, safe. But after her husband died, she started rewriting the rules. Called it administrative modernization." He gave a bitter chuckle. "Modernization, my ass. She changed ownership boundaries, reassigned lake access, even altered who technically owns common land." I frowned. "You're saying she forged HOA documents?" Pete's eyes met mine. "I'm saying she rewrote history and paid the right people to notarize it." He leaned in closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Check the map in there. The one marked Parcel Overlay, 1986. It'll tell you why she wants your property gone." Before I could ask more, he stepped back. "Don't bring that back here. And don't let her see you with it." Then, without another word, Pete turned and walked back toward his garage, shoulders hunched as if carrying decades of secrets. Inside my truck, I set the file on the passenger seat. My pulse was pounding in my ears. For a long moment I just stared at it. Then I tore off the rubber band. The first thing I saw was a map, faded, hand-drawn, the kind you'd see pinned up in a county surveyor's office in the 80s. The header read, "Lakeview Estates, Development Phase 1, 1986. The lake was drawn in blue ink, the lots numbered neatly around it. My property, Lot 14, sat right on the waterline, a large irregular shape surrounded by smaller residential lots. But what caught my attention wasn't the layout. It was the faint red outline drawn over Lot 14. A second boundary line. One that extended deep into the lake. Beneath it in faded handwriting. Proposed easement, private access, Henderson family." My breath caught. Henderson. That was the name Pete had mentioned. The Army vet who lost his house. I flipped through the rest of the documents. There were letters between the original developers, county surveyors, and even the first HOA president, Pete's signature among them. But then the handwriting changed, the dates jumped forward, and the tone shifted. By 1992, Charlene Rohr's name began appearing. Her first letter as Vice President, Compliance and Records. And that's where things got murky. Her version of the HOA's charter was completely rewritten, with references to Phase 2 jurisdiction extension and retroactive maintenance authority over the lakefront parcels. Except there was no Phase 2. The county never approved it. And then I saw it. A notarized page that made my stomach twist. Transfer of common access, Lot 14, Lake Parcel. Recorded under HOA authority. Filed. Except the notary seal was smudged. And the signature of the supposed county clerk? Arthur Pyle, the same lawyer who told me he couldn't help. That night I didn't sleep. I spread the documents across the truck bed like a crime board. Under the weak glow of my flashlight, the pattern started to form. Charlene hadn't just extended HOA authority illegally. She'd absorbed part of the lakefront into her own association holdings, making herself and her inner circle effectively the private owners of lake access, and anyone who bought adjacent property would technically owe them perpetual dues. But my lot was different. Lot 14 was never part of their jurisdiction. It was county land, until I bought it, which meant she'd built her empire on a forged foundation. And she knew it. I picked up my phone and called Arthur. He didn't answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. Then a text popped up from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Mr. Halverson. You're not the first to try." My heart thudded once, hard. I stepped out of the truck, scanning the tree line. The woods were still, dark, but the uneasy feeling crawled up my neck. There was a faint red glow near the road, a small LED light blinking. I walked toward it. The camera, one of those portable wildlife trail cams, was strapped to a tree, lens pointed directly at my truck. I yanked it down and shoved it in the toolbox. If they were watching me, I needed to move fast. At dawn, I drove to the county records office in Millridge, 30 miles away, far enough that the HOA's influence might fade. The clerk, a thin woman with glasses, gave me a polite smile. "How can I help you?" "I need access to development filings for Lakeview Estates. Specifically from 1980 to 1990. She frowned, typing into her terminal. "That's odd. There's a note here saying those files are sealed under private agreement." "By whose authority?" She squinted. "Lakeview Estates Board of Trustees, authorized by..." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes flicking to me. "Charlene Rohr." "Of course. Can I at least see the index numbers? Maybe copies?" I asked. She hesitated, then leaned closer. "I can't print them for you. But if you were to accidentally see the microfiche drawer while I'm on break, I wouldn't know." She stood, stretched, and walked toward the back. 2 minutes later, I was crouched over a dusty metal cabinet, flipping through reels. And then I found it, Lakeview Estates, Survey Revisions, 1989. I fed it into the old viewer and turned the crank. There it was, a scanned letter signed by Judge Alan Rohr, Charlene's husband. The letter authorized permanent jurisdiction extension for all contiguous parcels abutting Lakeview, granting the HOA enforcement rights equivalent to municipal oversight. He had granted his wife absolute power just before he died. But the signature date was wrong. It was dated 3 months after his death certificate. My hands shook as I took a picture with my phone. That was it, the proof. Charlene's empire wasn't just corrupt. It was built on forgery, fraud, and a dead man's name. On my drive back, I spotted headlights behind me, black SUV, tinted windows. My pulse quickened. I turned down a side road, then another. The SUV followed. I killed my lights, swerved off onto a dirt track, and waited. The SUV slowed at the intersection, idled for a moment, then drove on. When the sound faded, I exhaled shakily. I had enough now to burn her entire empire down. But I needed help, someone who could go public. I thought of Pete, and of the file he'd given me. If he'd kept those for decades, maybe he wasn't the only one. When I got back, Pete's garage light was still on. I walked up quietly. "Pete," I called. No answer. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, oil, rust, and something metallic. Then I saw him. Pete was slumped over his workbench, his old wrench still in his hand. His coffee mug had spilled, dripping across the wood. A single sheet of paper was pinned to the wall above his head. Official looking. Notice of violation, unauthorized disclosure of HOA records, Section 7.3 breach of confidentiality. At the bottom, signed in neat cursive, Charlene Rohr, President. I stood in Pete's garage long after the sheriff's lights faded down the street. No sirens, no ambulance, no investigation. Just the hum of the old fluorescent bulb overhead, flickering like a dying heartbeat. They called it a heart attack. I called it convenient. The paper with Charlene's signature fluttered slightly in the breeze from the open door. I took a photo, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Pete had been trying to warn me. Now he was gone. By morning, word spread through Lakeview like wildfire. The old man in Lot 23 had passed peacefully. The HOA posted a condolence notice at the entrance, complete with Charlene's elegant signature and a Bible verse about obedience. I tore it down. Then I drove straight to Millridge again. I had one goal: find someone who wasn't afraid of her. That someone turned out to be Deputy Aaron Wells, the same young officer who'd served me the injunction. I caught her in the parking lot, leaning against her cruiser, coffee in hand. She frowned when she saw me. "Mr. Halverson, you can't be here. You're under a restraining." I held up my phone. "Look at this." I showed her the image of the judge's letter, Alan Rohr's signature dated 3 months after his death. She froze, her expression shifting from irritation to disbelief. "Where did you get this?" "County microfiche." Lakeview Estates file. She swore under her breath. You shouldn't even have access to that. Then explain it, I said quietly. Tell me how a dead man authorized his wife to seize private property. Erin looked around nervously, lowering her voice. You have no idea how deep this goes. Half the county budget runs through Lakeview property taxes. Charlene's brother-in-law controls code enforcement, her nephew's on the planning board, and the sheriff. She stopped herself. The sheriff what? She hesitated, then said it, is dating her daughter. That hit me like a brick. So what do? I asked. Erin took a long sip of coffee, thinking. You can't fight her here. Not in this county. But there's one person who might help you. A reporter out of Raleigh. Name's Ki11Ed. She covered a housing corruption case last year that nearly took down a senator. I can't officially connect you, but she scribbled a number on a napkin. Tell her Deputy Wells said you're legit. I nodded. Thank you. She glanced at me one more time. Be careful, Miss. They don't just ruin people's houses here. They ruin lives. That night, I called Cassidy. She picked up on the third ring, her voice brisk, curious. Cass Mendez. Miss Mendez, my name's Mike Halverson. I've got proof that a local HOA president forged legal documents to seize property, and that her late husband, a judge, was dead when he signed them. Silence. Then, you have documents? I have the originals. And someone who tried to help me just died under suspicious circumstances. Her tone sharpened. Where are you calling from? Lakeview Estates, South Carolina. She exhaled slowly. I know that name. There was a complaint filed 10 years ago, whistleblower case, never made it to court. The witness disappeared before trial. Disappeared? Vanished. No body, no file, nothing. You sure you want to dance with these people, Mr. Halverson? I looked out across the lake, where the moon rippled against the dark water. I made my daughter a promise. I'm not backing down. Cassidy's voice softened. Then you've got yourself a reporter. 2 days later, she arrived. A beat-up Jeep, a press badge on the dashboard, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many lies. We spread Pete's file across the tailgate of her Jeep. Maps, letters, notarized frauds. She took photos, cross-referencing each page with county archives on her laptop. Jesus, she muttered. This isn't just an HOA scam. This is land theft. Look here, every property adjacent to the lake got reassigned through maintenance easements. That gave them control over any structure within 50 feet of the shoreline. Which includes my house. Exactly. And the kicker? Those easements funnel rent income into a holding company called LVR Development LLC. She turned the screen toward me. Guess who the listed manager is? I didn't have to guess. Charlene Rohr. Cassidy nodded grimly. And her co-signer? Arthur Pyle. My lawyer. That night, we broke into the HOA office. It sat at the edge of the neighborhood, a neat brick building with polished glass doors and a fake community center sign. Cassidy picked the lock with practiced ease. Inside, everything was spotless, sterile, like Charlene's personality printed in marble and LED lighting. We found filing cabinets labeled by parcel number. I went straight to lot 14. Inside the folder was a photo of my house taken just weeks ago, stamped, unsafe structure, approved for demolition. Below it, a printed invoice for $112,463.21. Look at the dates, Cassidy whispered. This was approved before you even bought it. I flipped through more papers, inspection reports, signatures, even county seal stamps. But one caught my eye. Environmental notice, asbestos, and toxic waste. Except the lab name was wrong. I'd worked construction long enough to know the testing company listed had gone out of business in 2003. Fake reports, I said. They declared it unsafe so they could tear it down and claim the land. Cassidy photographed everything. She's running a racket, condemn, demolish, absorb. Then we heard it, the click of heels on tile. Charlene's voice, sharp and cold. I told you he'd come back. Cassidy killed the light. We crouched behind a file cabinet. The door opened. Charlene stepped in, flanked by two men, private security, judging by their earpieces. "Check the records room," she ordered. "If anything's missing, I'll have the sheriff raid his truck." We stayed still as shadows. My pulse thudded in my throat. The men opened drawers, flipping through folders. One of them grunted. "Lot 14's file's gone." Charlene's tone turned to ice. "Of course it is. Burn the backups. He won't get far." She turned to leave, and for a brief second her face passed under the glow of the hallway light, calm, composed, utterly inhuman. When the door shut behind them, Cassidy exhaled. "We need to get this out now." We spent the next day in a motel room off Route 7, scanning every document, uploading copies to cloud drives, sending encrypted backups to her editor. But by nightfall, strange things started happening. Her Jeep's tires were slashed. My phone stopped connecting to the network. And when I stepped outside to get ice, a black SUV idled across the street, same one as before. Cassidy peered through the blinds. "They're watching us." I nodded. "Let them. Because tomorrow morning we're going to the state attorney's office." The next morning we never made it. Halfway down the highway, a truck ran a red light and plowed into the passenger side of her Jeep. The airbags exploded, glass shattered, and the world went white. When I came to, the air was thick with smoke. Cassidy was slumped over the wheel, unconscious but breathing. The truck was gone. Hit and run. I crawled out, blood running down my temple, and staggered to the shoulder. My phone was smashed. Her laptop cracked, but the USB drive was still plugged in. I pulled it free and shoved it into my pocket. Sirens wailed in the distance. By the time paramedics arrived, Charlene was already there, pristine white suit, calm expression. "Oh my God," she said sweetly, kneeling beside me. "You poor man. I heard there was an accident." I tried to speak, but pain flooded my chest. She leaned close, her perfume sharp and cold. "Walk away, Mr. Halverson," she whispered. "You don't know what you're digging into. Lakeview isn't just an HOA. It's a trust. And the people who fund it, they don't forgive." Her smile never reached her eyes. Then she stood and turned to the sheriff, who had just arrived. "This man needs medical attention, and he's trespassing on restricted property again." I blacked out to the sound of her voice giving orders. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed, wrists cuffed to the rail. They'd charged me with breaking and entering, property damage, and obstruction. But Cassidy was alive. And when she regained consciousness, she'd already sent the files to 3 national outlets. Charlene's empire was about to face sunlight. When I was discharged from the hospital, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No calls, no texts, no messages from Cassidy. The nurse said she'd been moved to an undisclosed facility for her safety, her editor's orders. The second thing I noticed was that my truck was gone. They'd impounded it as evidence. All my tools, my documents, even the flash drive copies I'd hidden under the seat, gone. But they didn't know about the one I kept on me, taped to the back of my phone case. The one with everything. I hitched a ride to an old mechanic I knew outside Millridge, Denny's Auto and Storage, a graveyard for rusted engines and people trying to stay forgotten. He took one look at me, bruised and limping, and muttered, "Jesus, Mike, you look like a man who lost a fight with God." "Close," I said. "The HOA." He laughed, but when I told him what happened, the smile faded. "You're talking about Roar's people, huh? They've been buying up half the county. Folks vanish after sellin' Lake property. One woman, old Mrs. Torres, sold her cabin, went to live with her sister in Florida. Or so they said. But her sister came by last summer looking for her. Never heard from her since. That stopped me cold. Where was her cabin?" He scratched his beard. "Other side of the lake, down Ridge Hollow Road. Parcel, let me think. 7B maybe. Parcel 7B. The number hit me like static. That was the same parcel referenced in one of Pete's old files. Transfer voided, owner deceased, unverified. I pulled the USB from my pocket. "Mind if I borrow your computer?" I spent the next 2 hours hunched over Denny's old desktop, digging through scanned property records. Every lot around the lake was accounted for, except one. Parcel 7B ownership, redacted. No sale records, no taxes, no current owner listed. It was like the land didn't exist. But tucked inside the data folder was a thumbnail image, a photo from an old county survey. I clicked it open. The picture showed a rundown cabin surrounded by pines, a dock jutting out into the fog. But what caught my eye wasn't the house. It was the wooden sign hanging crooked by the door. Halverson 1989. My breath caught. That was my father's handwriting. I drove out there before sunset, Denny's borrowed truck rattling down the gravel road. The woods thickened, the lake glimmering silver through the trees. And there it was, half collapsed, eaten by vines, the name still faintly carved on the old sign. I pushed the door open. The hinges groaned. Inside smelled of rot and dust and something older, the scent of memory. Photos lined the wall, warped from humidity. My father, my mother, and a little boy holding a toy boat. My father had owned this land. And somehow, Charlene had buried it from every record. I searched the cabin until night fell, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. In a floorboard under the sink, I found a small tin box, rusted shut. After prying it open with my knife, I found what Pete must have been looking for all along. A deed. Signed in 1989 by Judge Alan Rohr himself. It confirmed my father's ownership and contained an addendum, a transfer-on-death clause granting the property to Michael Halverson. The paper trembled in my hands. This wasn't just about land. Charlene had erased my family's name from Lakeview history. Headlights flashed through the trees outside. I killed the flashlight crouched by the window. A car door slammed. Then another. Voices. She said it's this cabin. A pair of flashlights swept across the front porch. Two men, same ones from the HOA office. I ducked behind a toppled chair, heart hammering. One of them stepped inside, his boots crunching glass. "Smells like death in here," he muttered. "Check the back." I slipped toward the window, every creak sounding like thunder. Just as I climbed out, a beam of light hit my shoulder. "Hey!" I ran. Branches whipped my face, roots snagged my boots, but I didn't stop. The truck was 50 yards ahead. I heard one of them shouting, then the crack of a gunshot. The bullet tore through the tree beside me. I dove behind a log, pulled out my phone and turned on the camera, recording. "This is Mike Halverson," I whispered. "If anything happens to me, it's the Lakeview HOA. Parcel 7B is mine. My father's deed proves it. They're trying to bury it." Another shot rang out. I scrambled into the truck, slammed the door, and floored it down the dirt road. By the time I reached the highway, my hands were shaking too hard to drive. I pulled over and texted Cassidy's number, even though I knew she might not see it. "Found something. Parcel 7B. Deed in my name. They're coming." No reply. Then, 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A known number. I answered. "Mike." Cassidy's voice was faint, hoarse. "You need to listen to me. They're watching the roads. They have access to the state property database. They'll know what you found." "I've got the deed," I said. "My father owned the land. Rohr signed it." "I know. I found something too." She coughed. "There's an offshore account, Halverson Holdings. Set up the same year your father died. The payments go to a trust labeled LVC12. "What is that?" She paused. "Lakeview Covenant 12. It's not an HOA. It's a front. They're laundering money through property seizures. Every time they condemn a home, it triggers a payout to that trust. Your father's parcel was the first. He must have found out, and they buried him with it." My throat went dry. "You're saying my dad didn't just die?" "I'm saying," she whispered, "he might have been their first cover-up." Static crackled on the line, then silence. That night, I parked the truck by the lake and stared out at the water, black glass reflecting the stars. The same lake where I'd scattered my daughter's ashes. The same lake that had swallowed my father's name. I thought of Charlene, her calm smile, her cold warning. This wasn't about property anymore. This was about legacy. And she'd been erasing mine piece by piece. The next morning, I drove to Mill Ridge Courthouse. When I showed the deed to the clerk, her eyes went wide. This can't be right, she stammered. That parcel was dissolved 30 years ago. Then how do I have the deed? I asked. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Because it was never supposed to be found. She pulled up an internal note on her screen, a sealed court order dated 1991. Case hashtag 91-04-3A, State vs. Halverson Estate, sealed. The plaintiff? Lakeview Estates Development Committee. The presiding judge? Alan Rohr. My stomach dropped. He'd signed his own order against my father after he died. Charlene had forged her husband's name decades ago to seize our family land and build her empire on it. And now I finally had proof. As I left the courthouse, a car pulled up beside me. A tinted window rolled down. Charlene's face appeared, calm as ever. You really should have listened, she said softly. Funny, I said. You sound nervous. Not nervous, Michael. Tired. You think you've uncovered something new? You're 20 years too late. Your father thought the same thing you did, that truth could win. It didn't then and it won't now. She smiled. Go home before the lake takes another Halverson. The car rolled away. That night, I sent every file, every scan, every photo to 3 different journalists and a legal contact Cassidy had given me. Then I uploaded the video I'd recorded during the chase to an anonymous site. By morning, it had 400,000 views. The comments exploded. Locals, former residents, people who'd lost property under mysterious circumstances. Charlene's name was trending by noon. And then the bombshell. Cassidy's paper published the story. The Lakeview Covenant, how one HOA became a front for generational land theft. Within hours, the state attorney announced an investigation. But Charlene wasn't done. At sunset, I got a call from an unknown number, a man's voice, deep, emotionless. You should have left the past buried. Then a click. And when I looked out the window, there was smoke rising across the lake. Parcel 7B was burning. The first thing I smelled was smoke. The kind that carries memory, burning pine, diesel, and the faint sweetness of something you can't ever get back. By the time I reached Ridge Hollow, flames were already clawing at the sky. Parcel 7B, my father's cabin, was a torch against the darkness. Fire trucks ringed the road, lights painting the trees red and white. The lake reflected it all, a shimmering hellscape. And standing at the edge, calm as ever, was Charlene Rohr. She wore white again, the color of control. And beside her, the sheriff, arms crossed, pretending not to see me. I pushed past the barricade. That's my land. Charlene turned, voice smooth as glass. Correction, Mr. Halverson, was. The sheriff stepped forward. Sir, you need to back off. Back off. I shouted. She torched evidence. That was arson. Charlene tilted her head slightly. Or perhaps your cabin was struck by lightning. We'll let the inspectors decide. Unless you'd like to confess to being there earlier tonight? I froze. Cassidy's words echoed in my head. They control the county. She smiled faintly. You really should have left the past buried. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the gravel like a countdown. By morning, the fire was ruled an accident. Faulty wiring in an abandoned structure. Convenient. I sat in Denny's garage, staring at the ashes on my boots. He slid a mug of coffee across the table. You gonna let her win? He asked. No, I said. But I'm done fighting her on land. He raised an eyebrow. What's that mean? It means she's hiding something under that lake. 2 days later, Cassidy met me again, alive but battered, her arm in a sling. You're insane, she said. You want to go diving in a lake owned by the woman who just tried to kill you? I spread the map on her dashboard, the one from Pete's files. Look at this contour line, depth anomaly right here, near the old boathouse. And this, I pointed at a small symbol, almost erased. This was an access point. There's something down there they didn't want found. Cassidy sighed. What do you think it is? I looked out at the water. The real beginning of Lakeview. That night, under a moon like pale ice, we took Denny's boat out to the coordinates. The water was calm, unnaturally still. I strapped on the oxygen tank, flashlight secured. Cassidy frowned. "If you're wrong." "I'm not." Then I slipped beneath the surface. The cold hit like a slap, swallowing all sound. The beam of my light cut through the murk, revealing long shapes. Trees half buried in silt, fence posts, fragments of roofs. There was a town down here. An old road appeared beneath me, leading to the remains of a building, brick walls, a collapsed steeple. A church. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. Lakeview wasn't built around a lake. The lake was built over a town. And at the base of that church, half covered by weeds, was a plaque. Mill Hollow, founded 1874. I wiped away the grime, and something glinted underneath. A metal hatch, sealed with a chain. I cut it loose with my dive knife, swung the door open, and shone the light inside. Rows of boxes, seal crates, and stenciled on the side of one, faint but legible. Property of LVC Trust, Archives. My pulse spiked. I grabbed the nearest crate handle, but it was too heavy. I took a photo instead, 3-4 angles, and kicked back toward the surface. When I broke through the water, gasping, Cassidy was shouting, "Boat!" On the other side. I turned. A black pontoon was gliding toward us. No lights, no markings. "Get in," she yelled. I climbed aboard, ripping off the mask. They followed us. She slammed the throttle, engine roaring. The pontoon gained fast. One of the men raised something, a flare gun. The shot streaked across the sky, hissing, then exploded against the water, flames spreading like liquid fire. "Jesus Christ!" Cassidy screamed. "They're burning the lake." I grabbed the camera and memory card from her bag. "If we don't make it, this has to get out." We zigzagged through the burning water, heat blistering our faces. The pontoon veered closer, then suddenly stopped, blocked by debris. We reached the shore, leapt out, and ran. Behind us, the lake burned. We hid in the woods until dawn. When the smoke cleared, the news headlines appeared. "Mysterious fire at Lakeview Estates. Officials blame fuel leak." Cassidy scrolled through the story, shaking her head. "They'll bury this too." "Not this time," I said, pulling out the camera. "We have proof, photos of the crates. If we can find one, if we can prove what's inside." She nodded. "Then we end her." We tracked the lake's history back through old deeds and water rights records until we found the original acquisition file. In 1987, Lakeview Development had purchased Mill Hollow Township, population 112, through a forced relocation order. Only one problem: no relocation records were ever filed. 112 people had vanished. Cassidy's hands trembled. "Oh my God, Mike, she didn't just steal land. She covered up a mass disappearance. Buried them under the water," I whispered, "and built her empire on top." That evening, as we prepared to leave town, we heard a knock on the motel door. Cassidy drew her gun. "Who is it?" A voice answered quietly, "Deputy Wells." We opened it. Erin stepped in, pale, shaking. "I can't stay long. They found out I talked to you. But I got this." She handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photographs, aerial images taken before the flooding of Mill Hollow. And in the center of one photo stood a man on the courthouse steps, signing a document. My father. Next to him, Judge Rohr. The caption read, "Mill Hollow Incorporation Agreement, 1987. Erin swallowed. "Your father was the original whistleblower. He tried to stop them from flooding the town. He died 2 weeks later, car accident. No investigation." I felt the room tilt. Cassidy whispered, "They killed him to cover Mill Hollow. Then erased every trace of it." Erin nodded. "And they'll do the same to you." At dawn, Erin drove us to the state capitol. We handed everything, the deed, the photos, the archives, to the Attorney General's office. It took hours, but by noon, the official word came down. Criminal investigation into Lakeview Estates Development Trust launched. Charlene's name was finally on record, but as we left the courthouse, my phone buzzed. A known number. I answered. A woman's voice, calm, smooth, familiar. "You think sunlight will save you, Michael? You forget, I built this lake. And everything that touches it belongs to me." Then silence. That night, the rain returned. Heavy, relentless, washing ash into the water. I stood on the shore, watching the reflection of the burning sky fade into black. Cassidy joined me quietly. "You know this isn't over." "I know," I said. "But for the first time, she's the one running." She smiled faintly. "Then let's make her drown." The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. By the third, the lake had risen over a foot, swallowing the old dock, the trees, and the road that once led to Mill Hollow. Cassidy and I sat in an abandoned storage unit, surrounded by papers, photos, and maps that connected every thread of the Lakeview HOA's lies. Cassidy rubbed her temples. So Mill Hollow wasn't relocated. It was drowned. "And my father tried to stop it," I said quietly, staring at the old blueprints we'd found in Pete's box. My father's signature was at the bottom of a document labeled, "Deny Permit Approval." He'd refused to sign the dam expansion. 2 weeks later, his truck went off the road. Charlene Rohr hadn't built a community, she'd buried one. We needed proof. More than photos. Something that couldn't be denied. "The crates," Cassidy said. "We get one out of that lake and we end this." That night, Denny helped us. His garage smelled of oil and dust as he welded together an old car winch and generator. "If you hook something down there," he said, "I'll bring it up. Just don't drown doing it." The water was black as oil. I slipped beneath the surface, light cutting through clouds of silt until the drowned town appeared, frozen in time. The steeple, the rooftops, the ghostly main street. I reached the church, found the crates stacked neatly where they'd been before. But one had burst open. Small ones. My breath caught. Children. Before I could surface, a low hum vibrated through the water. A submersible drone, scanning the ruins, turned toward me. Its red light blinked. Then a flash, an explosion, and the church wall caved in. I shot upward, kicking hard. My lungs screamed as I broke through the surface, gasping. "Pull it!" I yelled. Denny's winch groaned, the tether whining as a crate rose dripping from the depths. Headlights flared on shore. SUVs. Men in tactical gear. "Go!" Cassidy shouted. We hauled the crate into the boat, bullets slicing the water around us as Cassidy gunned the engine. We sped into the dark, spray slapping our faces. When we finally hit shore on the far side, we hid the crate in Denny's garage. Inside were ledgers, bones, and tagged evidence bags. Cassidy flipped one open. Offshore accounts. Property transfers. Charlene. The sheriff. Even the judge. Denny swore softly. They built their fortune on corpses. But the worst was at the bottom, a transfer document from 3 months ago. Trust reassignment to LVC Junior Holdings. It read. Recipient. Jesse Halverson Foundation. My daughter's name. Cassidy looked at me in shock. They turned her memory into a company. I clenched my fists. Then I'll burn theirs to the ground. 3 nights later, everything changed. Charlene called me at 3 a.m. Her voice was calm, smooth, rehearsed. "Michael," she said, "you've made quite the mess. Meet me tomorrow at the clubhouse. Bring the files. I'll tell you the truth about your father." I knew it was a trap, but I went anyway. The clubhouse was empty, the lights low, rain streaking the glass. Charlene sat behind the conference table, her pearls glinting under the chandelier. A decanter of wine sat beside her, untouched. "You look just like him," she said softly. "Your father. He was idealistic." I kept my distance. "He tried to stop you." She smiled thinly. "He tried to stop the dam. Not me. I wasn't even in charge then. But when he refused the contract, the company handled it. I simply inherited the aftermath." "What company?" I demanded. She slid a folder across the table. Lakeview Corporate Trust. Established in 1954. Long before me. My husband worked for them. When he died, I became their steward. I opened the file. Contracts, offshore transfers, sealed orders. You flooded a town. No, she said. The trust did. I just signed the papers. She leaned forward. Do you know what Mill Hollow sat on, Mr. Halverson? Lithium. $1 billion worth of it. That dam wasn't for electricity. It was to hide extraction tunnels. Your father was the project's engineer. When he found out, he threatened to go public. Her voice dropped. The brakes on his truck failed the next week. The room tilted. My throat tightened. You murdered him. She shook her head slowly. I didn't have to. The trust takes care of its own mess. Footsteps echoed behind me. 2 men in black suits entered. Hand it over, one said. I stepped back, my hand on the camera. If I die, every file hits the press. Charlene's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Try me. The lights flickered. Cassidy's signal. The power cut. Darkness swallowed the room. I dove behind the table as glass shattered. A flash grenade went off, white light flooding the space. Cassidy burst in through the back door, swinging a crowbar. We bolted out through the rain, shots ringing behind us. Charlene's voice followed us.